And when you open that, I probably want a couple sips. Just a word.
Good. Okay, ready? We're gonna.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open the other mode. People can hear us now, but it's funnier to hear people talking behind with no cameras.
Hear us talking about how I really want a sip of James's rain energy drink.
Boom.
Boom.
Welcome everybody to the Rain Energy Drink Show. I tried really hard to make my camera update because it was really bright behind me. I know you hear us. That's the fun part.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad it's working.
I'm glad it's working, right? Always a concern with us. But yes, thank you. We can hear you. I can hear you. I am not signed into chat into the new program. That's okay, but I'm over here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Goblin Space Race. This is Tabletop Terrors. Coming in, Tabletop Terrors. No,
You're very white.
I know. I'm very aware. We were just talking about that, and I was trying to put my finger over it or something to make it. Thank you. Oh, yes, new overlay.
He has been working so hard on it. I've loved getting to see it be done step by step. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad he gets to use it.
It's making it worse. I need to make it brighter.
Oh, man. We could turn on the kitchen light. That'll help, probably. Actually.
It's fine. I'm this white in real life. James is the sun, says Cole. Yes, that's true. It's
lens
really
flare is on, so. James.
Sorry, actually, yeah. Let me go turn off the lens flare mode now. I don't have a camera software, so what is going on in here? It's a really good question. Actually, Cassie brought something up when Cole was telling me that she could listen. I'm going to open this up and we're going to partake. No, let's talk about Goblin Space Race.
Yeah.
Cassie told me something.
I told him something that just... This was the big reason why...
Transcended my frame of reference.
It did. It really did. It kind of broke him. The face he made was just beautiful.
Oh, I misunderstood it first, and it turned into it being... me thinking it was something extremely interesting. So, Cassie,
yes.
Do you remember what it was that you told me that just blew my mind? So we were sitting on the couch. We were both reading different books.
Yeah.
We were both reading the same book, because that makes sense.
Reading the same
We were both
books,
reading different books. And
having a great time.
We'll sort of just bother one another like, hey, are you busy? Kind of like, do you have a minute? And we'll talk to each other about, okay, this cool thing, that cool thing. I remember roughly what it is. I know you're searching for it, but it's really like...
yeah, basically it's that albatrosses can go for years without touching land.
Now,
years.
And, years without touching land. Now, here's the thing.
Yes.
Moments prior to that fact, Cassie had just clued me into the fact that sometimes albatrosses sleep on the wing.
Yes.
So she says they sleep on the wing as they're flying, right? And have one eye open for navigation.
Yes.
Here's the thing. She said that, and then she said sometimes they don't touch land for years. And I thought that she meant that they stayed in the air for years. And suddenly the planet was far more magical than I had ever thought possible. And I was like...
His mind
in
was
disbelief.
blown.
My mind was so blown. They would have to if they're going to fly for years.
I don't have it in front of me, but now I remember that it's like they're able to fall asleep, letting one hemisphere of the brain fall asleep at any given time. And then they do actually have power naps, just a couple seconds long, where the whole brain actually goes to sleep.
For at different times.
Yes.
Somebody asks, the person says, I made it, hello, what's an albatross? An albatross is a bird, a type of bird, a migratory bird.
A huge seafaring bird. They breed on really small islands, really far out, probably in the Pacific. I can't find the page for the life of me. I have not earmarked any of the right ones.
But it was, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But that was exactly it, Cole. Because then I was sitting and I said, we sat there for a minute and she was just kind of watching as it dawned on me, and then I was like, oh, because they can land on the water.
Yes.
and and then it made sense. But all of that happened, and then I thought, okay. We started talking about, we started brainstorming. And I don't actually know if you brought it up or if I brought it up, but we started brainstorming. Well, what if there was a creature that, and maybe it started with a dragon. I was like, okay, imagine in a world, there's a dragon. And I didn't specify what kind. There's a dragon flying, and it flies overhead once a year, is what I said. It's asleep. It's basically sleeping on the wing and just...
And it just keeps going.
People can see it, but they can't do anything about it. There's nothing,
We talked about whether it had sentience or not, and one of the things that I remember imagining is that this creature might become aware of itself and then be like, oh, but everything's okay. Maybe, what if it's afraid to, drift off course too much or something?
See,
Like, which would just be interesting.
and that's fair. I very much imagine the sort of
But I know you have
very high intelligence. Well, and really we're kind of talking through some of the same things we went through, because I think it was sort of a fun journey. But I was imagining just a very high level, uncaring sentience, benevolence of like, yeah, you mentioned that there might be other creatures like living on it in symbiosis. You know, there might be birds roosting on its back. I could see that, or different things, you know. And
this is a really fun thing for me. I was really intrigued with the idea of this beast because we could also apply deep sea gigantism and then, you know, twist that around and instead apply it to this creature as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was a fun thing. Like, it's slow moving. Albatross, for instance, they could stay, you know, in the air for so long because they're just, it's so effortless for them. They don't need to expend extra energy needlessly flapping. And there's lots of deep sea creatures like the Greenland Shark that James showed me from Reddit the other day.
Oh, yeah.
That was living over 400 and, what is it, maybe 50 years? But it was over 400.
Yes, yeah, it was like over 400 years that this I almost said horse. That this shark had been alive.
Yeah.
And it just got so good that I didn't realize how close they were to sharks, but that is very much the way they describe how the Zerg came to be and how the primal Zerg in StarCraft came to be.
I didn't know that.
Is they sort of continued to, like, where one, because the more they killed, the more power they got, there became one alpha that, like, really took over, because once you get so strong, you're just the strongest one.
Yeah.
You're just the biggest one. And though that's not really related to what we're talking about, I can see this creature that we're talking about flying through the air being that type of creature where it's almost transcended, like, what, and I asked Cassie the same question, what would a 350-year-old shark think if suddenly, after its entire life, you gave it objectivity to be able to look at itself and know everything that it did? In a sense, it's like you could see how existentially you might just fly through the air for a little while and think about life.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know, like, this type of problem is above our pay grade.
Because it's like, you have sentience. Do I start comparing myself to other things now? Is my life no more about... It gets in the whole thing. But what is...
Aesir says, did you know that there are theories that the... And
Quetzalcoatlus?
That's a good one. Quetzalcoatlus. Yeah, I really was trying not to say it. Flying reptile in dino times is actually theorized to have gone extended periods without landing on the ground.
It's another, the pterodactyl,
so it's
right?
Lime. Oh, like a dragon that lives in the sky most of the time. Not lime, yeah. I got you. But yes, it's like a dragon.
Pterosaur.
But imagine, let's look at this perspective. A pterosaur, yeah, Cassie's saying different things. But imagine the perspective that, yes, it lives in the sky, but that its life is so long that it hibernates for generations. So this thing is flying overhead, and people see it, but eventually it's just like the sun. It's a thing that goes over you. And especially consider if this is a fantasy world, we're going to talk about goblins
in a little bit. What if it did become a part of your calendar, but then it, like, veered off chart one day?
As soon as it's a known entity, the moment one thing changes, I mean, scientists would be charting it, like, just like the stars.
Yep.
And if it started to veer off a little bit, there would be whispers, you know? There would be, like... But that idea of this... what we know to be a creature, but I just find it so interesting that it is like that the time scale is such that even though we might work for, you know, centuries to try to get on top of this thing, which is what we might talk about in a little bit, it's a week. You know what I mean? It's a short pit stop where it was asleep in orbit of some little, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, who knows what cosmic life this being is living.
It's just surfing on the jet stream, so it's just sometimes falling asleep. Oh, hey, I'm over Africa, or whatever, you know, continent is in this world.
What if the landing zone was migratory and the goblins aren't at the location in the Great Landing every year as a huge celebration? So, Aesir, this is a really good point. What we're discussing, though, is actually something that we will never see land in our lifetime. This is a phenomenon that has been going on for probably hundreds of years.
Yeah, as far back as we have in our Goblin City here.
Exactly. And so we have something called the Goblin Space Race. Now, I'm going to read something I wrote. I don't usually like reading on stream, but things like this, I suppose, are appropriate. Maybe I'll have to get over myself. I put this in the description, so you've probably read this, but this is what I wrote when we started thinking about what became Goblin Space Race.
Heck yeah.
Like a great many others in Revelstroke, you are obsessed with the Goblin Space Race. Lucky Birdman Gonzalez started it all when he first launched himself thousands of meters into the air, conveyed by sheer force of will and his trade secret propulsion gel concoction. Piloting little more than an outhouse with fins and a nosecone, Lucky returned a hero. Toting inexplicable artifacts and spouting unbelievable stories, Lucky claimed there lied a whole world atop the great beast in the sky. So, some crazy goblin in, I don't know, a random fit of passion decided one day that he was going to make it onto this thing's back. And so I'm imagining Lucky, everybody called him Birdman, because he was literally he's the person in the story that's constantly trying to devise flying machines.
He is the guy that's trying to do it.
He's the one, and it's the one you know. So, at some point, they get used to the crazy old man testing these things. And a small crowd gathers every year when he gives it his latest shot, and sometimes he doesn't even get off the ground. You know, maybe for a few years. I don't know how...
In the beginning, for sure.
Exactly. I don't know how dark this story's going to get, but you could see a part of it where he sort of put down his passion, or maybe he had a bout of alcoholism. You know, he really struggled with alcoholism for a little while.
We're giving him a big old backstory.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, the people of the town know this person, so it was just such a great triumph when he to see him finally go. You know, he's been working on this for years, and most people have written him off by this point. And he flies up and, lands. And so what you now have is a group of people gathered around with their drinks for the annual, Lucky's going to give it his shot and fly up there. And he, climbs in, barely an outhouse with a nose cone and some fins, and launches himself. And as he flies higher and higher, shaking pieces of the rocket flying off as he goes, gets higher. Somebody points out it's higher than he's ever gotten, and then further and further still. And the beast... And finally, his rocket arcs and lands on the back of the beast.
And then we don't know what happens.
And then
he's
nothing.
Up there. And then he's
That's
up there.
it, right? Nobody really thought he would ever do it. Nobody actually thought for a second that he would ever make it. They just thought, well, he'll parachute down again and we'll have a drink and it'll be great, right?
Yeah.
Lucky was gone for a little while. And then one day he was just back. And the stories he told... People,
and he came in with trinkets and whatnot.
If he didn't have proof,
goodies.
if everybody in the town didn't literally watch it happen, they would have never believed the things he said about what he found. So that's what began the Goblin Space Race.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. So. And I explained this idea to Cassie, but the goal of this game would be to tell a little bit of a smaller story, but I thought it was interesting to constrain it by the event that happened, this one thing a year, where if this is a game with a GM that you have with 2 or 3 players.
Yeah.
While many of the things will be familiar, we have just decided to... more like a video game, play a very specific story. And I think because it's a role-playing game, we'll be able to... It'll be very much... very replayable. Even in the same concept, just like a D&D or a world. Even as constraining as it may seem, to say, well, it only takes place during this festival leading up to the launch and seeing what happens, Even with just that, I think... that just a great wealth of stories can be told, because really it's a world where you get to be a goblin tinker, a goblin engineer, a goblin creator, with nothing more to do than build your latest invention to shoot up into the air and gain notoriety. It's a treasure hunter story.
And it is absolutely treasure hunter story. More stuff that we thought of was also the Red Bull contest.
Yes,
That's
so
important.
Cassie and I recently talked about something, if you don't know, called Red Bull Flugtag. And this is basically a thing that Red Bull does. It's like an event where people can come out and there are rules about what you're able to do, what you're able to make, but everybody can make a flying machine, and then you fly off, a few meters from the ground, and you see how far you can fly. But, it's not just actual flying machines. It's not about flying. People have done one. There was a tavern on wheels where it was literally just like a little pub that they built like a float that they just sit there and drink and pretend that they're not flying off of the Red Bull Flugtag stage. It becomes just a joke. And it just seemed like Goblins effectively doing a Red Bull Flugtag was a lot of fun.
Right.
And then to be able to find a reason that they would want to do it.
Oh man, I love the idea of having to detail like just some silly ones, you know? Like in the background, you could have a reporter or whatever, a little goblin reporter thing, and there they go. They have the magic tavern on their little, what are these, bicycles? I think they made this is a new thing, folks. And then just like they launch and just, you know.
Exactly. And so there's a few things in chat that I'm going to get to, but what I want to say is there is a festival leading up to the actual launching, and I love the idea that they sort of basically do their own Red Bull Flugtag, where there is like the junior version of the, like, it's like you're pretending to do what everybody else is doing, but it's a Flugtag, it's a game, you know, it's not really about doing it the best.
I think that'd be great.
So yeah, Cole says it was done in a TV studio somewhere. I'm not sure even exactly which thing she's talking about, but trinkets or it didn't happen, Lucky. Did he spend a whole year up there? It's really funny because Cassie and I talked about how if somebody went up there and stayed, they would have to stay a full year. In the case of Lucky, we haven't decided yet, but depending on what's going on up there, and I think that it's kept vague for purposes of creating why as part of your own story, which is just game design stuff, so excuse that. But he didn't. He came back at some other time.
We're sponsored by Goblin.
Person. Then what would he eat and drink? He had to have jumped at some point unless the dragon has an island on his back. So person, you bring up a really interesting thing.
Yes.
The way I originally sold this to Cassie and what I'd like it to really be, I am scared to even tell people this because it's what they really want. But there's a world in which this game is a way to playtest a specific mechanic I want to make called outcome tables, which maybe we'll get to. But that really there's a world where being a goblin that goes treasure hunting by launching themselves up onto this creature, where I'm imagining an entire island up there. So yes, I'm imagining geological features, caves, potentially people living there. I want it to really, even like baked into the game, I want it to really be a constant sense of wonder. So it's almost like I can't say what will be there because part of the game will be never knowing what's there until you're there, you know?
And we don't want to say too much and then not deliver.
Oh, yeah, and that's true, too. But, like, that's the big thing is, and to some degree, it's almost a cop-out to say, I want it to be so wondrous. But I've read, like, a few, like, Alice in Wonderland-style books, and I've always felt a little bit let down.
Yeah.
But it's because as soon as you write it down, it's not fun anymore.
It's not the same. But we'll see.
So I think, if you want some of this, I think making it a part of the game you play and only like the game being a catalyst for what is really happening up there, it's almost like it will be so empty to read all the different outcomes of what could be up there if you bought the book, right? Say if this was ever in a book or something.
Yeah.
But it really shines those same things when you're playing them in the game. You know what I mean? It's almost like to make sure that the magic is in the game and not in the book. And that's a whole separate conversation. But Oscar Gross says, Lucky Long Flight, the new festival. I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but yes, Lucky. You know what?
The name of the
Those are different words I've said so far. I don't know what it is beyond that. I don't know. I'm sorry, Oscar. Sponsored by Job Gola. He did say that later, but someone could accidentally explode themselves trying up there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that people blow up on the launch pad. Like, it is like when trying to break the land speed record. This is a thing that they know is very dangerous that they still continue doing.
Absolutely.
Like, it is absolutely a dangerous thing to do. You guys remember that flat Earth dude with that homemade rocket who passed away last year? I feel like there'd be doubters of rocket even doing that.
What?
So that happened. There was a guy that for a long time was building his own rocket to prove once and for all for himself, and I suppose everybody, that the Earth was in fact flat, that everything was a lie. I believe he launched and then it didn't go well. I didn't remember that. I think he did have a parachute and stuff, but I still think it didn't go quite right.
It didn't work.
I don't remember that exactly. But, so I do think, so that's why I'm excited one day about a game where the dungeons are on the back of this thing. Like, I'm imagining a very Studio Ghibli Adventure Time kind of like series of things. So it's not really you go up there and there's bugbears and it's a leaky, sewers or a leaky cave. It's like, no, you go in and it's a library of unwritten books. I don't know, I'm making random stuff up, but it's like concepts that don't make sense, but as soon as you say them, you kind of have to decide what they are, and then that's what they become.
Maybe
that sounds so ridiculous.
Maybe there's coral-like structures on the back, and they're so big that you could actually walk into them and explore the interior.
Yeah. Oh, like, basically, I'm imagining now almost like anthill-like carved out,
Little portions.
corals. Yeah,
Yeah.
where you can go spelunking and explore and, I don't know, find ridiculous things and artifacts and, like Gobbo, Fraggle Rock, and Outer Space. That's
There we
fair.
go.
It's funny, I said
Job.
Job, where usually I would say Gob because I think it's funny, but I was saying Job from Arrested Development, but that makes a lot more sense.
I figured
Gobbo because from
Goblin.
Fraggle Rock. You know what? I'm going to be really, oh my gosh. I'm
figured
going to be so
Goblin.
sorry. Right, Oscar, I now see what you're saying, and it went so far over my head. It was great, and I just realized that now you were talking about the Goblin from Outer Space, everything we're talking about. And I ruined that. The beginning of aviation, everybody was trying to outdo everyone else. Yes, so in a sense, maybe the game will then be, part of it is there's like this era where the game is making the rocket to try to get up there.
Yes.
And then later there is one where now that they've made that a bit easier, you still get that part of the game, but it's like a generation or two later, where it's easier to get up there, but now it's all about what you find up there. It's the same game in a sense, but imagine D&D First Edition and Second Edition. That probably couldn't be a worse way to describe it, because it couldn't be further apart. But in a sense, the same game, but extended so that it sort of included more stuff,
Okay.
And depending on when you played kind of a different game. You either played the game where you have to build your rocket by doing quests to get up there, to be the first one, or that part is a small part of the game and you still simulate it a little bit, but you get up there and then it's like, okay, well, what supplies did you make it there with? What things did you pack? Will you have enough? How do you get down? Do you get stuck for a year? Stuff like that.
Yeah, do you get stuck for a year? Are there people up there? How do you interact with them?
So we talked about that. I really love the idea that there are people up there.
And this is something that I wanted to slip in. It could be that people up there might be from a different culture. Because I mentioned to James, like, oh, what if it's also like a coming of age thing where maybe this mountaintop clan of people, of whatever, they're like, you have to try and hook onto the beast when it comes by and then try and glide down
so
later.
There's like a culture where
something.
they're higher elevation, so it's closer, right? So if we're at a low elevation, the goblins are really far away. But basically, it's like these people have their own ritual with it. And we talked about it going around. I love other people interacting with it.
Exactly.
Right? Because then there would be like people, scientists, or whatever that means, would see hooks, new hooks every year from the creature.
Strings coming down.
Strings or whatever, yeah. And they would wonder, what those could possibly be.
So, like, maybe you have to go up there and, grab something and try and parachute back down. But maybe somebody's parachute broken, so they've been stuck up there too.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. Like, absolutely. Now I'm imagining, what is it, from Jumanji, Robin Williams. Yeah, I don't know why that sounded so wrong. Robin Williams from Jumanji when he comes back. He was, like, living off of something in the jungle. Josh says, is this the right place? I heard there was pie.
You made it.
I have pie. I don't have pie. But I wanted to make you jealous.
Pigpug says, Lucky just wanted to get there before Luca, the Russian guy.
Right? Oh my gosh. And what's really interesting...
Next town over. Town over.
Exactly, right? Because I do like the idea, again, because in a sense, though I've leaned into the space race thing, I do love the idea of it being like this big, I'm going to say super dungeon, that's what people say.
Yeah.
But imagine it is like its own landmass. It has all the things a landmass has. In a sense, though, we're deciding what some of those things are. But, like, don't limit yourself, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I know it doesn't make sense that there'd be a waterfall, but wouldn't that be cool? Like, we have to work a little bit with what we can say and what we don't want to say. Or
we can play with it. Like, maybe it goes through so many clouds that, enough moisture collects on all of the trees, all of the rocks, that suddenly it all comes flooding down, so you have a temporary waterfall, a flash fall.
I really appreciate
flash flood.
Trying to make it sciencey, because I'm like, no, I would just imagine if you draw a waterfall on there, nobody can tell you no. No, I do appreciate, like, that there is a way that you could see an ecosystem would very slowly grow on something, like...
Because I can see it, like, so long as there's water, man.
Yeah, I'm leaving that to the reader, apparently. Maybe there's a society that's trying to kill the dragon and spends each year preparing for its return so they can try to kill it again.
That'd be another one.
I think absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is what we have is one perspective, right? This space race, and there was other stuff written. Specifically, I wrote things about how there would be a company that or people would sponsor some, so you'd have like the really good teams, like I'm imagining F1 teams, that are like do everything really well and like the perfect, and they're able to hire the best engineers and stuff, and even they can't do it. And obviously, in a sense, that potentially makes the underdog story even better.
Yeah.
Because you're going to beat them, right? If it's the movie, you're hopefully going to beat them when you do it. You're going to be better than them. But they're going to try to steal your ideas, and they're going to try to make sure you don't make it, There's going to be this other conflict where there's so much drama on the ground. By the time you get to actually being able to launch this rocket and seeing if you make it, I want there to have been, such a path carved that it really makes the launch of a rocket or whatever. We actually talked about alternative methods of launching. We can move into that. I like talking about the boring stuff. Cassie reminds us to talk about the more fun stuff.
Well, I talk about the animal stuff, so depending on where you're looking from,
yeah, right. So,
stuff too.
So I want part of the game to be basically that the game is the you leading up to launching, and you have to build your rocket, and you have to sort of go around and do quests and do things to ensure the best outcome for your rocket. Maybe your parachute has holes in it, so you have to bring it to somebody to be mended. And if you don't have the time to do that, or you don't get a chance to do that, or you don't do that quest, then you have a parachute that may not work. So it's a little bit, more game design stuff. The important thing is you're going to be building some sort of rocket that mechanically later we're going to roll and resolve, and it's going to, be high tension, and you're going to barely make it. Right?
Okay.
We can say those things. But what Cassie and I talked about is it doesn't have to be a rocket. It can be any way that you can think of to get up there. So what were some of our alternative methods of getting up on the back of this creature? They're trying everything.
James mentioned magnetic engine?
Oh, yeah, okay, like a railgun kind of style one where they use like electromagnets to propel something really quickly. Usually that thing becomes super hot because of the way it works, but they're goblins, they'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out.
Alternative methods of
what
launching.
you're looking at mentions, did you get the proper propulsion permits?
Oh, yeah.
You know what, I feel like that, because James also mentioned, you'd have people probably wanting to sabotage you to some extent, too.
Yeah.
So, somebody could pull that card, basically, of, you guys aren't registered to actually have this railgun.
Right? Yeah, there would be bureaucratic stuff. Absolutely. This would be, there would be, it would be all of those kind of issues.
Oh, we talked about, a megastructure storyline campaign? No, we did not talk about that.
Designed to test a launch.
But yes. We could do that. We also have the trebuchets.
Well, yeah, we'll get back to that, because you were talking about the trebuchets.
Yeah, I was going to get into.
No, that's okay. Yeah, because we were talking about trebuchets. Yeah.
Yeah, because we talked about that, and it actually made me think, or I think James was trying to put a word to it. What about, shot put? We have a trebuchet that's, horizontal and spins around like a carnival ride.
Exactly. It's goblins, so in my mind, I'm imagining very much like carnival status. Yeah, exactly.
It just sends them off.
Yeah, I love that.
And then we did have, what was the other one? What else?
I didn't think about it. Cole says there's always that one daredevil dude being the goblin cannonball. Like literally somebody being launched out of a cannon. I love that.
There's going to be some cannon propulsion.
Yeah.
So that's combustion.
Oh, slingshot is a good one.
So combustion.
Slingshot, shot put, combustion, yeah, I don't know. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't know. And okay, maybe that's a good point. What we're going to end up doing, potentially, is, I guess those are two words.
Yeah, we need to see what these alternative methods, what kind of
because
categories?
I realized what we're doing is you would have to make decisions throughout the game to maximize your launch later. So the thing is, what I'm realizing now is, game design-y, you have to decide each thing as you're going. I sort of made up that you'd have your blueprint, but in a sense, you are figuring it all out now.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some level of last-minuteness to it. But the point is, you don't know your propulsion level yet, so you can do the slingshot, but it has this % chance to fail and does this to your outcome table.
Yeah.
It's like you're making choices that will all eventually culminate at once. So you're making choices about your role later based on which one of the methods. Right. Now, the thing is, you may not get a chance to use the combustion if you don't do the side quest that gets the extra fuel additive.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of making the best of what you can with what you have, while still being goblins and building crazy stuff and getting up to antics with your rivals and stuff.
So, this isn't something we've just said.
Okay, but yeah,
about. Is there still going to be stuff like +1 inspiration with these tables that you're talking about that we've been working on?
We can talk about the tables. Let's talk about the tables.
Okay.
I did want to point out, we can go back to the chat a little bit, Oscar,
Yes.
the mega structure storyline from design to test to launch. And I think what you're talking about is exactly what we're describing. Like, yeah, it is effectively a mega structure. I love that it's biological.
Yeah.
Because I'm also, I don't know why, but I'm imagining
It's
like what starfish are, where when they dry out, it's like rock, but they're biological technically. Does that make sense? Where it's like, I don't know. We don't have to talk about starfish. I can see your face of how wrong I am. I can see it on your face, and that's okay. Other people say
No,
so.
I am very excited to explore that because I do want it to be. It's going to be a living thing, which means it has to have its own ecosystem, basically, to function. So that's going to be a lot of fun for me. I can't wait to do that.
I'm imagining a big chamber where its heart is there, and it's like beating.
Is it just hanging in the chamber?
So far it is, just because that seems cool. But okay, giant bow and arrows. That's cool. For the methods. That's the thing. Stuff like that. Like, I want it to be a category so that you could, in your game, make a ridiculous giant bow and arrow because it kind of doesn't matter.
And you should have at least one goblin attempt a bow and arrow, like,
Exactly. I didn't think about that. Which would be better? Person says, which would be better, a goblin cannonball or a goblin grappling hook? Like a group of goblin launches one goblin to the dragon, and then the one who made it up there pulls the rest of them up. So the issue with that would be they wouldn't have a rope long enough. And that sounds funny because it would be okay to build a story around making a rope long enough to do that. Because that would be worth a lot. And then there would just be a rope attached to it that's thousands of meters long, and then it would go around, the whole earth. I don't know.
Shit.
It would be extremely interesting, actually. But I think that would be better. I think that would be a great one. Pigpug says, as the dragon passes, he always drops a dragon pellet. The goblins then try to position a catapult under, asking, the force of the pellet to propel them upwards. I've got to give you clever. If I'm being honest,
I did think about that.
There's a part of me that is realizing that there are games about goblins, and people love, like, embodying what they feel are goblins. And that feels so goblin. It's not the sort of goblin I was thinking, the dragon pellet, but I would want the game to support somebody being able to say that, because in a sense, really mechanically it adds something specific to your table. It doesn't matter that it's that the dragon had a poop and it landed on the thing, and the scientists perfectly calculated where it would go. Like, as silly as that is, I want it to work so bad because it's really on brand.
If the path is like that planned out, this thing is that charted, and it's nothing unusual happens, you could do it.
Yeah,
really
that's
funny.
what I'm like, and I would want to work. Yeah. Josh says, close up a geyser and wait for it to launch you. Giant top with helicopter blades. Cole Sparks, when you first mentioned the dragon, part of me thought about the giant star turtle or fictional species from Terry Pratchett. I love how much you bring up Terry Pratchett. I'm sad at how much I don't know about the giant star turtle. But what's interesting is I took some inspiration from what people call world turtles. And it's from Discworld. Cool. Terry Pratchett, Discworld. Sorry,
there it is.
That makes sense because I'm like, that's what the thing you just said is from. That makes sense. Yeah, but that is really interesting because I really need to read that.
That's also.
I'll have to look into it. What?
That's in Buddhism as well.
The giant star turtle.
Like in Hindu. This
turtles
is
all the way down.
This is rough. Yeah, this is just. Like the world is a disc, and it's being carried by 4 elephants, which are then on top of a turtle, which is then in a sea of milk or something.
Oh yeah, where it's like it just keeps and
was that interpretation that I read?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love that because what some people ask, like, I think that's the joke. There's a book called this and various things called this, but it's called Turtles All the Way Down. Because if the world is on the back of a turtle, then what is that turtle walking on?
Another turtle.
Another turtle, that's a world. That's turtles all the way down. You know what I mean? It's just turtles forever.
Has to be turtles all the way down.
Turtles all the way down. So, but we can talk about the tables a little bit because we'll try not to get too ridiculous into it, but because I have a tendency to do that. But let me remember how to zoom real quick, and then we'll do that. That's it. Brandenburg. Okay. So, I'll try to explain this, but imagine that there's a table, right? You don't have to imagine it's actually here. I say imagine a lot, though. And we have numbers. And if this works the way I think it works, that'll work. So we have 21 numbers. No, we have 20 numbers. So this is, you're rolling a d20, is basically what's happening. And this is sort of a rough way to explain it. Let's put it that way. We're going to not, and when you start out, your things are, maybe we'll say they're neutral. They're kind of gray here. I made it a little bit small because I'll scoot it over, actually. Sorry, I was looking at what it looked like. Yeah, oh, that's the Discworld, Cassie. Yeah, that's funny.
I'm-
I didn't know that was the deal.
Well, I mean, I read it in something, so I want to know if that's actually true or not. If they were just ripping off Discworld to be funny. 'Cause
I see.
I was still reading a comic, but I also know that it's a serious comic relating to Siddhartha and his growing up.
Oh,
and
I
one
see.
of the
Yeah,
questions he asked was like,
because Discworld
when-
may well be based on an old Indian or Hindu
Yeah.
myth, or
but it's also likely that this comic might have been for fun, just taking
Just saying
Discworld
what
and putting it
Discworld is.
in
That's
because
true. Absolutely.
that's not the Siddhartha finds out the meaning of life and all that stuff.
Yeah,
later.
yeah, exactly. Like it should, could
So
basically
that's
just be a
why I was
mislead. Gotcha.
confused.
Person, I could totally imagine a large goblin throwing his smaller goblin friend. I really love that. Cassie mentioned if there were giants, maybe they would hire giants to throw them, or you know what? I could see the same thing, like a bigger one. Like if there's a slingshot, you might have somebody else, that needs to pull it back, or I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was like I thought of having a giant and a goblin. Yep.
Yes, exactly.
They're a little team that work together and they
Yeah.
just toss them.
But okay, so
They raise money for charities, for goblin charities.
Goblin charities. I love it. Okay, so I can't fit 20 here, and maybe if I get rid of this, but I don't know how to do that. So, the point is, as you're playing the game, you have a table of what's going to happen when some part of the launch is happening.
Okay.
I imagine there being multiple different phases. The different items that you get to add to your vessel, is what I was calling it in the rules, change what happens on this table. Now, the thing is, I did it backward. That's funny. Because I want it to actually go this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I wasn't sure if that was going to work. I've never done it that way before. But the point is lower and higher is higher. But as you gain things, you might get a bonus where on every even, you get a +2 to your next roll, for example. Separate from whether or not that roll succeeded. And so what you're doing is you're slowly building a table that has different things happening on it as you're playing the game. And so some of these might be green, and some of these lower ones might be red.
Yeah.
And then some of these might be like a little bit of an orange. And the idea is, looking at this, what's going to happen when you roll on this table.
Okay.
Instead of a check of like, you need to get higher than 14, you're looking, you go, oh man, on this table, if I get a 9, that's orange. And I know that means something. But if I get an odd, which maybe would be next to it, you get an odd number. Even though it was orange, I get a +2 on the next one. So in a sense, you get... What you're trying to do, I think, is you're trying to add up to a certain number of meters you have to get to.
Okay.
And as you do that, you have a phase of, this is maybe the first phase where you launch, and maybe you have a really solid launch that has a lot of good outcomes, but you didn't really get to spend very much on the later part, where you're flying through. And so you have, as you play the game, you build up these different items, and all of them have associated with them a table like this.
All right.
And what you're going to do as part of the flying up there, you're going to roll on them in succession and simulate the sort of every part of the launch.
All right. What are the parts of the launch then? Or I guess we have the launch, flight, landing. Is that
sort of
like that?
more like the pre-launch check, where like, okay, is there gas in it? Is there this? You have maybe your last minute additions, and it would depend on which ones you had. Certain different items would necessitate different phases.
Okay.
Because there's like the launch phase is much simpler for a slingshot because we just got to pull you back.
Yeah.
But if you're in a complicated, rocket, the launch phase is a little more complicated than the flying phase, for example, where it's like, depending on what things you gathered through your quests, you will have different simulations.
Okay.
But the point is, you as the player, and really as the team of players, are trying to make judgments based on how well this rocket will fly. But just like the goblins in the real thing, you don't know. Especially maybe the first time you play the game.
Yeah.
You get as many items as you can and stuff, but you might roll really poorly. If you ever played Darkest Dungeon or a game like XCOM, because of the way randomness works, a lot of the time, even with sort of the best laid plans, you can absolutely do poorly or fail or have trouble, And so that will be a little bit of a thing in this game, but part of the goal is to, even in failures or things that seem bad, give you little things that you can use later.
Okay.
To simulate barely making it over the line. Basically, it should always feel like you just barely made it. That the last thing you did was the most important, and that...
You basically want the players to make sure that they have tension.
Yes, really, and in a sense, yeah. And the thing is, it can get even more complicated because flying through the air. You know what I didn't think about?
What?
Because now, and this is why we stream, I guess. We'll get to the chat, and then I'll tell you about the test phases. There wasn't very much. Pre-launch checklist needs to include is everyone use the bathroom? Yes, right. The first astronauts did not have a way to go to the bathroom. The standard operating procedure was to pee in the suit. The first people that went into space, I believe.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so that's just a factoid trigger. But what I realized is, as you're going through the game, you can potentially simulate the launch and test out some of the parts. So not only do you get scenes where you're going through like some part of the launch phase,
okay.
You know, maybe one late night while you're testing out a new part you just got. There's like a phase where once you complete a quest and you get some stuff and you put something together, you can test it.
All right.
And sometimes that means like testing the rocket fuel to see how well it does. You know, but what that gets you able to do. Oh, cool. We'll talk about that in a second. I have a factoid trigger for factoid trigger. Didn't realize that's not ubiquitous. But what it allows you to do is show players what the launch is going to eventually look like, and what it's going to be, so that it's not a surprise when they suddenly get to that phase and they're like, oh, that's how it works. There's like they get some testing phases in a sense.
I think that would be good because then, as you said, players can get used to using this kind of playstyle. The roll tables.
Exactly, the outcome tables. Outcome tables will also, I think, factor heavily into the game, and there's going to be a system of social interaction so that when you're going and trying to convince somebody to do something or have somebody help you, the same tables kind of come into play, but they just simulate a bunch of different stuff about the world. Testing phases should help you in future rolls. So yes, Cole, I love that. I like that if you get to test a part, maybe, like, because maybe that's it. You have to make a decision to test or not test something. But if you test it, you get to do everything I said, and you get some bonus because now you know whether or not that part works, right? It probably removes some of the lower parts on the outcome table because you go, okay, well, it's less likely to fail now. So these go from red to orange.
Or would that mean, like, as another option, you could say that you also get to, like, fine-tune it? Because,
yes.
Especially since you know that this is a working thing.
Maybe, depending on which parts you test, because some parts would be higher, like better rarity than others. Some parts you have maybe some characters have an ability to roll to get a special addition to them.
Yeah.
So some parts, if you test them and get a little time with them, get your head around them, you're like, oh, you made this special optimization because your character's a tinker. So what's the tinker optimization for the ZX 1500 fin? Oh, well, you get a +5 on your, you know what I mean? Like, it creates a situation where you're doing something very unique, but you're also, in the end, adding something cool to the rocket that is eventually going to fly. And I keep saying rocket, vessel.
How much variation how many types of goblins are there? Because we have a tinker, or is there going to be, which is kind of like an engineer.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. What types of goblins, okay.
Because this is something that James mentioned to me, is that you want this to be like, no, you come here, but you're a goblin. You're playing as a goblin who lives in the city. Possibly, right?
Oh, yes, yeah. You're a goblin. Sorry, I was looking in the chat. You are a goblin in this city. Yeah. And you are, by trade, somebody that should be in this business.
Yes.
As part of the game.
So what kind of types of goblins would we have, do you think?
So I think you will make a character with different quirks and things about them, things they do, maybe where they work. I'm playing with a concept from the How to Make Comics book. I forgot who wrote that. It's a really famous book. Scott McCloud, very famous comic book, where he talks about there are 3 parts of a character. There's their inner life, in a sense, their perspective. Maybe there's something else, I don't remember. And then there the things that make them their silhouette, the actions they take. I can't think of what it is, but like the quirks about them, the way they talk funny, the way they, they're so short and they run around.
Their attributes.
Sort of, yeah, like the things that make them. So I'm playing with where, in a sense, you wouldn't necessarily specialize in that way, but there's this separate thing called the role system where there would, that's what you're talking about. And there would be one that's like Tinker, which to me is like...
Because...
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm asking because, okay, I can see it. We don't necessarily need a goblin who is labeled as a rogue.
Yes, yeah, and I see what you're saying, because in this case, classes that we're used to in role-playing games wouldn't really exist. It would instead be like what you're saying, where, like I said, it would be a role, where you would go, I want to be the one that is, you know, like patching on parts at the end and it seems like it'll never work, but somehow they always pull it off.
Yeah.
And somebody else can be the one that wants to be perfectly calculating everything and doing the math and writing the blueprints, you know. And it won't factor into the mechanics as much as far as a rogue does roguish things. Whereas a tinker will do everything the way a tinker would.
Yeah.
They would see it through a tinker's eyes. So they would solve a problem by hitting it with a hammer.
Yeah.
Whereas the more sciencey, so it's like, I don't know how many there will be, but there will be different like archetypes of person. I could see one being treasure hunter, where a treasure hunter is like, well, they don't really get into the science as much, but you know, they're really gung-ho and, you know, a little bit of a loose cannon.
They have a knack for looking, so maybe they're, even though you're not in a dungeon yet, they're very good at finding, like, hidden parts.
Because some part of there would be a part of the game where you can go to the junkyard and, like, salvage for parts, and the treasure hunter would get bonuses there.
Yes.
You know, and yeah, so...
there's been a lot going on in
the
chat.
A lot. So Josh says... okay, by the way, got to peek in an active space shuttle. It came through on Piggyback
cool.
7. That is really awesome. Testing phases should help you in the future. Testing takes time, yes. Opportunities to refabricate a part, said Gamers Theater. Yes, I realize now I'm making it like the old racing games that I liked. I say old because like Gran Turismo, you could like change one part, you know, but like your flywheel, you could make it lighter and it made you this much faster. But that was such a cool idea at the time.
Yeah.
Where really the game was about racing cars, you know. But it would expend resources, so red somewhere else. There's a lot to be said about that. But yes, I wanted to use an example, but exactly, like it would all be cost-benefit analysis of like how you're changing your table.
Awesome.
Because what I'm realizing through this is that what I originally wanted is the low was bad and the high was good, but now it kind of needs to be all over the place. Because...
Ooh, yeah. We got to see how
like greens and reds all mixed up. Exactly. So I'm like, I didn't consider that, but because, yeah. So there's a lot, I think, to be said about that.
But that's good.
It is very good. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. There was still more in the chat. There's still more.
Still going, yeah.
Still more.
I think all goblins could be tinkers. In this, okay. There's a lot of baggage with goblins. Goblins, in this case, are the people of this world. When they say goblin, they mean it the way we say human.
Yes.
When we say human, we mean it to mean us, our singular selves. There's nothing else like us.
Yeah.
That's what the goblins. That's the way they say it. Yeah. It's a very weird thing, but it's a very specific thing.
And that's what actually brought up me asking James if there were going to be different roles, because while we could say all goblins are definitely dexterous and maybe are more inclined to be tinkers, they could still be anything else.
What's really funny, and this is just a whole separate thing,
yeah,
that we don't have to get into. We literally can't say anything about every goblin that is true.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't say anything about every human that was true. So why would it be any different for goblins? We don't have to go there, but it sounds funny, but I'm doing a thing where, yes, people have all their own baggage with goblins, but these are goblins with real lives trying to get to space. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't know. That is a sort of separate thing that is not focused on, but is in a very explicit...
it's just that not everybody's going to be a tinker.
So
that was why
exactly,
I was
because I don't want to grow up to be like you, Dad. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just, there's a lot there. I don't know why, but in a lot of my worlds, I imagine goblins and gnomes is the two smartest races. That's the interesting thing, person, is it kind of goes in with that, because it's like, there are so many people... Goblins are in so many things. Goblins are a little bit special. Goblins live in their own little niche for people because they can be so many different things. They're called, like, it's a word that has lost all meaning, because if you say goblin to somebody, everybody imagines something different. There's goblins in the Hobbit. We just saw that in the movie, you know, like, but it goes as far back as when they wrote the Hobbit and the goblins were there, you know. Yeah. There are goblins in Pathfinder, sort of famously.
Warcraft. Of
course, Warcraft, that's what some of this is based on, like, yeah. There's a lot to be said about goblins. Cole says, eating time when you're on a deadline would help. What did Josh say? Is the pilot also the inventor, or is one group working on the method of launch and they pick a special pilot? Disconnect between those who know the vehicle and those that fly them. I'm imagining like also an F1 team where there would be a driver. But I'm also playing with the idea that there's a rule that you have to get the whole team there, because then that makes the game easier later. It makes a little bit less sense. Cassie pointed out it'd be way easier to get one person there than four. But the game doesn't make as much sense if you're shooting one person into the air, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's way cooler if it's like an Apollo mission where in the air we have to fix something to get our targeting computer back on track.
Maybe
you lose that if there's not 4 people in it.
Maybe that's just like... Oh, I don't know. What is it called? How many people can play a game? Usually there's a limit, you know?
Oh, yeah,
so,
yeah.
like, you can have a single-person RPG if you wanted to,
Yeah.
you know?
And there are those,
Yeah.
and some people do solo ones, but yes, just, yeah.
So you're allowed to, like, still send one person up, but I agree you should have the whole team, certainly if you want to go dungeoning afterwards.
Yeah, right.
On top
Exactly.
of
Like,
the
that's what's
beast.
funny is the trip is just the beginning. Okay, even more in the chat. Gamers Theater, wannabe... This sounds like their character they're playing, and maybe it's not, but I'm buying into that. They're a wannabe pilot tinkerer named Boom Boom. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's what I got. Certain design, you would need a muscle type, Oscar says. Yeah, you're right, there would be all kinds. That's the fun thing. Cole says Daredevil. You need a goblin who is specialized in explosives, where Boom Booms handle the fuel. Person, I suspect that's the Boom Boom too. Goblin Gopher. Wow, a lot happened, and I'm not following, and that's okay. They are. Scroungers. Yeah, right. I love Scrounger versus like Scavenger. Cole, goblins with real lives trying to get to the space dragon, for sure. Right? That's the story I want to tell. And you can't stop me. No, not that you would try. Gamers Theater, Alchemical Maestro. That's what's fun, too, is we can kind of put any name on them. Because the other thing is you could name yours whatever you wanted. Like, the goal is to make it...
They were listing roles, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's what I thought. Yeah, and that's what I mean. The goal is to make it so that you can kind of make your role what you want, because it gives you what you need. But like I said, it's more the way you see the world. Like I said, a tinker is going to nail something onto something to make it better, or hit it to try to fix it.
Yeah.
There are jokes in real life about engineers and mathematicians and physicists, right? If you've heard math jokes before. And I'm now thinking of some, and I'm like, well, the point is they're boring, so I'm not going to sit here and tell them.
Hey, what was the factoid trigger of the factoid trigger?
Oh, the factoid trigger. We went all the way back. I'm so sorry. Factoid trigger. I
that.
forgot. Goblins. We'll get to the end of the chat, and then I'll talk about that. Oh yeah, an anthropologist would need to go. We were listing roles. Get 2 up there, and they use the summoning stone. Oh yeah, right. Wannabe pilot, tinkerer. But those are all roles. Okay, I see. I appreciate you clarifying, because that is very funny. But factoid trigger. So Cole, I didn't think about this, but that is something that we say. I suppose at AbTab, me and the guys, and like has permeated our thing, because Cassie uses it too. Where there are some things people say that bring like sort of an interesting fact about that is directly about that thing, and it's like I now have to tell you. You mentioned the ready, the B-52 bomber, if Josh is still here, and just something happens where there's like something that they know they have to tell you about it, and it's not a bad thing at all, right? It's a good. You just label it. You go, hey. You basically, when I say factoid trigger, I go, this has nothing to do with what you're saying, except for that you said one word, and that one word was that. Did you know? Let me share one. Barker recently shared a video where the Nine Inch Nails guitarist. I later read this, but it's not clear in the video. They were playing a show at the Hard Rock that they were saying was really crappy, and people were spitting on them from the balcony. And they're at the Hard Rock cafe or Hard Rock place, where on the wall is a signed Stevie Ray Vaughan guitar that's in a glass case.
Ooh.
And he breaks the glass case and takes the guitar out and goes to try to plug it in and play it like rock star status. And security chases him down. I don't remember if that was a factoid trigger, but we talked about factoid triggers, and then Barker shared that. I don't know, but that may have been something that came about as a factoid trigger because of no, I think Barker just shared that because it was cool. But that's fun story. But sometimes factoid triggers are like that sort of interesting thing. Yes, right. You've seen it happen. We're literally just putting a name to a thing that people do all the time because it, in my opinion, it clues them into what you're doing. It's like putting a little emoji beforehand.
All right. Tim had a question.
Yeah, Tim says, okay, so based on what you said about how unique all goblins are and how there's so much baggage, is your goblin style going to have gobby language? I don't think so, because they're going to be doing math and engineering.
Yeah, these guys are smart.
They are. They don't get energy drink on their foot when they're streaming. I'm sitting in a funny way, and then it dripped, but that's crazy. Oscar says, a part of the launch is the landing. Could they land on the dragon underbelly and climb to the island portion?
Possibly.
So we talked about this because the point is, if later there's a game where everybody has to make it, Cassie pointed out that, then if you simulate the launch and they miss, and the point is to then adventure on the back of this giant creature and find what there is to find.
Then that would suck.
it would be sad to not have one.
sad.
And obviously there's an argument for what I originally said was, well, everybody would get to try, but then you would just, like, video game style, you would just be up there. But you do lose something with that method, because that's sad. So instead, I think there would be, we devised a few different ways, but there would be different ways that people would be able to sort of bail out and potentially get up there, like a grappling hook gun or whatever. But again, this is sort of an era in the future where right now we don't have that sort of thing. It sounds funny, but like there's this the beginning era where it's all we're figuring it out and they're just launching stuff up there and they don't know about that. And then later there is the treasure hunting era where you just gotta get most of the way and then you shoot a harpoon gun at it and you climb up because they realized eventually you could do that.
Because they have like a practiced way that they're like, oh yeah, we know how to do this now.
Exactly. Okay. It's like it becomes more common. It's still like a daring, crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
And then plenty of people die doing it if the thing doesn't launch or you don't, it doesn't get purchased or whatever. You have a parachute. But exactly. Like, well, still. So, but that's what's really interesting is making them goblins will make people play the game differently. Especially if I don't go too in-depth about explaining that there are goblins, but instead saying that there are goblins of all kinds. Obviously, there may be some drawn or something within it, but I don't know. I chose goblins because it seemed fun, because it seems like they would try to do this sort of thing.
Right?
What I know of goblins,
especially as like a contest, I think it would be really fun.
Exactly, contest, and then to think that there would be treasure there.
Lucky being a little weird, and then people were like, "Oh, that actually kind of looks fun."
Right, exactly. In one of the original writings, I took this out because it was just so cheesy. But I said, "Lucky inspired a generation." But sometimes you need that kind of first draft stuff. It's really funny if I left it in there. If I said I took it out, but Cole says if they miss the first launch, maybe they wait until the next launch window, which is actually in a year. They would be able to probably do it multiple times, but there's a whole festival. I can maybe read that part. Gamers Theater said, "Oh, well, yeah." What's
I was just thinking that, the next launch wouldn't be until next year, so we do want to make sure that, you can launch and then have a great shot at making it in some fashion.
Yes, exactly. But that is a function of the game, not because you would probably be able to launch multiple times and you'd be able, you could stagger it. But instead, there's now this big festival that leads up to everybody launching at the same time and seeing it all happen. And how long is the Goblin Year?
I don't know yet.
10 days.
That is not even a planet. What is that?
It's not. Oh well, right. It has to be a planet. They just don't call it that. Gamers Theater says, okay, arrive late to the party, hence the gobble lingo from me. I was sort of thinking these goblins stole a set of plans from a gnome and are doing their best to make it work. So I do want there to be very much an air of this shouldn't work. Very much less like in Warhammer where it works because the orcs say it works, right? Because they believe it. Which I just always really disagreed with on a fundamental level. Don't at me. But it looks like it shouldn't work.
Yeah.
The goblins, in my opinion, they know the least amount it takes to get it done. That doesn't mean they do the least amount, right? There would be some teams that have the money and could, but it would be like an outhouse with a nosecone and fins is the way we described it. It's ridiculous to think that somebody would want to be in that building on the ground, let alone on a launch pad flying thousands of meters through the air, as it breaks apart around them and potentially it's just... I'm imagining just like a goblin sitting on a seat, with nothing left, holding on to something. Everything's, and just his whole face, back with big goggles and just floating back down, just barely, I don't know, touching it.
It's just poop.
And you know what? Okay, now of the many stories you can tell in this world, right? I'm making a game just in this one place, but I'm imagining Finding Nemo. It's a touch the butt scenario, and eventually somebody does get close enough, and something scoops them right up, and they're just like,
"Oh no,
what?" Just something grabs them. Who knows?
Ooh, that would be really fun though.
Absolutely, and that's what's crazy is
what if this unknown stranger that does not look like you, goblin? Maybe you've grown up in this city and you haven't actually got to meet a lot of people from the outside world. So this human, this dragon kind, was something else. Lowers a rope as you are almost making it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I really love that. That's the thing. I think there are so many stories that you can tell with, about what will happen. I think that's what's so interesting. There's really something to limiting it to one time of year.
Yeah.
Because if you could just constantly launch rockets at the dragon, it defeats the purpose in a sense. But the other thing is...
It's not as novel.
Well, and it also removes a sense of continuity, because the plan would be in the game to have a sense of it could be different every time. If you play it once, it doesn't mean that the next time it's the same. So, for example, when you're flying through the air, maybe a creature would come off of the creature from above and start attacking some of these, like some birds that are just roosting up there.
Yeah.
But crazy birds, right? But this is now one of the encounters. Now, the thing is, if you play next time, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have the bird encounter. It would be a surprise to you again. Not only would you have a different rocket and a different character with a different role, but maybe... because it's the same thing, it's like it's almost in protest to show you how many different stories we can tell, even if I constrain all of the things I've constrained so far.
And then hopefully we make it a little bit roguelike in that way. Because we do want to be able to keep using it.
Well, exactly. And in a sense, there's a... Okay. You can fail in the board game pandemic. I bring that up because that doesn't feel great, but it makes you want to play it again.
Okay.
There's a good argument for this game being one that's difficult to succeed the first time. In a sense, not what would be the point, but can you see a game designer's perspective that I would want, that if I can, if this were possible, right? This is assuming a lot here.
Yeah.
About my own skill, but I think it's possible. If I could make a game where you got it the third time, it would be a better game than if you got it the first time. Every player. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm struggling with that because it also might not feel good to miss it.
There was something that we talked about where players could kind of go off on their own for RPGs. I don't remember what game we were referencing.
Mm-hmm.
They go off on their own maybe as a little cutaway. And talk
separate
to each other,
scene.
separate scene about how they level up. So let's say maybe you do fail that first round, so we can say, okay, a year passes, what does your character decide to do? And you can go through, like, you can try and find more objects, maybe do a small dungeon crawl or something.
Oh, I see. You're saying playing the same character.
Playing the same goblin.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I didn't think about that.
If you were trying to extend this out, which
no,
is what
absolutely.
it sounded like.
What's funny is I was saying the exact opposite.
Oh.
But I find it really interesting that because you could play more of a campaign with it where, well, okay, you're saying what it should be. There's a lot of chat, but that is really good. That is really good. So yeah.
We'll think about that.
Because I can now see both sides.
And like this morning, guys, I was not on board with like making this part long. I was like, no, get me to that dungeon.
Well, the original pitch was that the space race part was very short, and that you got up there, and then you adventured on what promised to be the most interesting dungeon Cassie's ever heard of. Right? I sold it as well as I could. It's not written, like there's nothing to give her.
No, my own imagination sold it to myself.
Yeah. Fair, right?
Okay.
But exactly, you ran away with it, and then today I was like, well, forget all that, and you were like, no, that's the best part.
Yeah, wait.
But okay. So, okay, arrival. Oh, no. Josh says, maybe there are 3 rich goblins trying to get to Space Island to mine rare minerals. One owns a phone company, one owns a car company, one owns a website that started as a bookstore. So here's the thing. It is the sort of game where you can put that in your world, in that meta level, and it works, and it's funny. This is the type of game for that.
Yeah.
So I really love that, Josh. Absolutely. Because it's not enough that you could just put it in a book about this game. I would want players to consider that, just as you did. Because the magic of that is the rest of your players saying yes, and then one of them is named, and then they come up with funny goblin names for all 3 of those people that match their real-life counterparts. Cole says, no one would believe that, George. Cole, really? I first heard that belief makes it work thing when Lloyd ran the Mechac Goblin thing last year and thought it was so fantastic. I love the concept. So, Cole, that's fair, but in the context of Warhammer, it felt like a cop-out when I learned it.
Yeah?
Yes. What we're talking about is the idea that the orcs, their stuff is like made out of trash. And literally the way somebody described it to me, and this is maybe the part that was unfair, is when somebody described it to me, they said it in the simplest boiled-down fashion as though I already knew, and it just fell so flat. Another one, they paint their stuff a specific color, I think purple.
Yeah.
It's like a special color orcs can paint it, that is invisible to other people because they believe that it's invisible. They had an in-world way to describe it, but Warhammer is just its whole own thing. Specifically, it is an interesting idea, and in that case, it sounds interesting, like with goblins, but with the orcs and Warhammer is where I think it just doesn't fit tonally with the world.
Yeah.
In a world with so many other... I don't know. There's an argument I don't know. We don't have to talk about that, but
James has feelings about this.
Oh man, because there's a lot to be said about it, but I like it in some cases. So Oscar Gross, launch window is a really good hook for the story. Yes, I was telling Cassie, like, it's leading up to the week of, and you still haven't built your rocket. And she's like, well, wouldn't I have done it already? And I'm like, yeah, but it's way better if you have a week to do it. You know, we're still playing with that part, but we talked about it.
Yeah.
I failed in the board game Pandemic, says Cole. I have not played it since. I'm sure that's something I'm flattering. The thing is, it's exactly what I said, though. It is not fun to fail, especially if it doesn't feel like you failed because you understood. And that's where a lot of the testing and stuff comes in, is I want people to fail and go, oh, I see what I need to do next time. And maybe the game wasn't fun, or I don't know. I would love to hear why you didn't play it again, if it was that somebody else owns it, or if it was just like it left a bad taste in your mouth, because there's a lot to be said about that.
There is a lot of value in replayability, but I also understand, like James said, when it's a bad taste in your mouth, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's hard to get over that.
Exactly, like,
or to work past it for the game to like shine through and be like, oh, look at this cool thing.
Exactly, absolutely. And the game can be very hard. Like, really, on the regular difficulty level, I think you might fail half the time.
Yeah, I did want to say something because this is later in the chat.
Well, it's still going. Yeah, we're working. But you can go ahead. Yeah.
Josh said, make the dragon actually live in a spot in space and it enters the atmosphere of the planet, completes its orbit for some other reason. That's an option, but it reminded me that for a while, James and I were also like uncertain of whether this is a celestial body that is outside the stratosphere or not. But I think, at least for now, it is within the stratosphere. Like, there is oxygen and everything.
I do see what you mean, Josh, but I like the idea that this essentially becomes like the sun, where people just don't think about it anymore. You see it, and it's there, and to not see it would be more surprising. Exactly. Like, so, yeah, there is something to be said about that. It makes it more alien, but I love that it's so mundane, and that there's just a group of a bunch of silly people that once a year, they try to do this.
Ooh.
It would be as though they were trying to get to the moon. What would be the point? And then somebody touches foot on the moon and goes, hey guys, there's a bunch of cool stuff up there.
Like, I'm sure people have tried in Breath of the Wild to go on any of those dragons, right? Because there's a couple in that world.
Oh yes, there are dragons in Breath of the Wild, yeah.
And that's something that I was thinking is just, I want that awe-inspiring moment of having this just huge thing, you know.
Exactly, yes.
Through the world. So cool.
Person, if someone makes it one year, would they try to help other people get up the next, or would they just jump and parachute down? So that's what's interesting. It's so high up that they could, but they would have to devise a way to help people. Like, if you think about it, we could do that on the space station. We could find a way to help people up, but what would that look like? Now, it's not quite as high as the space station, but in a sense, to scale, the Goblins, it is in a sense as high as the space station. Like, the scale is so big that a rope would have to be so long that it just wouldn't work, you know? So, I don't know. I think that players are going to try and say a lot of things like that, and it's not that I want to curtail them, but instead that it's almost like that's too simple for goblins. It's almost like you're not thinking goblin enough, you know? But I think that you just had a normal question, so that's not to even necessarily say that to you, but to say that to the people that have those types of things.
But I think that's just an option, though. Like, I think you could have somebody up there from the previous year, or I think that they're there.
In the later era, I think people would go there and try to live there. I think that people would, like, basically right now, because people can't get there, it happens less. But I think it is something that would happen. Like, people would go up there.
It would be a real hot piece of territory then. It wouldn't be anybody's territory. It moves over
It wouldn't be anybody's territory.
How do you do that?
It would not be anybody's territory.
Because everybody's going
to... but Gamers Theater... Yeah, right? Gamers Theater asked a really good question. Would this game be magic-free? I have no idea. There might be some magic involved. I think that
some magic. Because
that's the thing. Like, tonally, there might be. Because it would still have to fall mechanically under the same rules as the rest of the stuff. So there will probably be magic only because it will make for a more fun game to describe. But mechanically, it will just be a reskinning. And potentially a slight difference, like some benefits to magic versus science. I don't know what other word to call it.
Yeah.
We talked about what Josh said. Table the Believe /Warhammer chat until some other time. Then, yeah, that's fair. Cool. Don't get me going. I'm sorry, I'm doing it again. And try to convince everyone to play it. It's kind of odd that we're not freaked out by a giant ball of flaming gas in the sky. Now that I think of it, right, Cole? That's the feeling. In my opinion, I've learned so much that I love.
We're floating through space on a rock.
Exactly. I love the perspectives of other worlds that try their best to show you how mundane it would be if that was you. Because we don't understand. We don't consider that if there was a mountain that talked every day, it would get old after a little while. But the first time we saw it, we'd be awe-inspired. But eventually you're just like, man, that mountain just won't shut up. Like, we take stuff for granted, you know? So I love that idea that it's just a fixture of the world. They are climbing their Mount Everest, you know? And there are bodies littering, you know, every body littering the creature was once a very motivated person.
To Gamers Theater, the Goblin equivalent of pumpkin chuckin'. That's what I mentioned to James. That's where they take trebuchets and chuck pumpkins.
Oh, yes. Oh, I see. Oh, that's there's a real world thing called that. Yeah. Okay, because I was like, how did they say the same thing as you? I'm like, oh, that's a thing.
I think there was even like a television show briefly.
Yeah, I vaguely remember something about that.
Certainly, I think during the fall.
Yeah. But okay. Certainly everything would be over-engineered. I agree. Exactly. I don't know. And there's a lot to be said. I posted a picture on the Facebook image if you didn't see it, but I'm working to figure out what the things will look like, but I'm not an artist, so that's going to be fun but difficult. But I don't know which direction I want to go because I don't want it to look... It probably won't be wood. Like the World of Warcraft style is like wood. You know what I mean? Like everything's made out of wood. They don't have steel. Some stuff is like riveted, I guess, but it's less common. Okay, Oscar goes Skyhook for getting there in the future campaign, literally. Gamers Theater, Wizard, Tinker, Alchemist, Trichotomy.
Would it be like, if not wood, then how would they... Do they have metal? Can these goblins
like sheet metal? I think so, yeah. Well, and like, they would have like smithing and factories. Like, there's going to be a weird mixture of industry that they have, but yes, they'll be like mildly industrial.
I'm not imagining, like, let's say on an airplane, the bolts are actually so smooth they try to make it as flush with it as possible. Oh, yeah. I'm imagining they would still do sheet metal, but, like, sometimes the bolts aren't quite as perfect.
And like, they're not round bolts, and they're not rounded, and they're not the same color. Like, they're those fat, chunky, like,
still a little blocky.
Like blocky kind of bolts. Like, I love that style.
Yeah. They're still getting it together.
Oh, there's a Modern Family Punkin' Chunkin' episode, Tim said. That's really funny. Okay. Cole says there are places that get so many earthquakes that it doesn't even phase folks, whereas I would freak out. Yeah, that's another good example. I worry about tornadoes, but I don't worry about hurricanes. I live in a place with hurricanes. They're old news. They're dangerous and they kill people, but they're old news to me. I just am like, no, I don't. Now, if they say leave, right, I leave. But it's more like...
We're fortunate that we get a warning for that.
It's just old news in the sense that if the power goes out, I go, okay, well, we planned for this. We're going to sit here and play board games, I guess, you know. We'll wrap up soon, but we'll do some chat. This was a very exciting one. Are you still doing good? Or do you want to wrap up soon?
I'm
ready
to
show off some stuff? Okay, we'll wrap up. That's perfect. I mean... No, I didn't realize how long we were... No, it's been a while. We usually go for about an hour. And we blew past it and we were still... So,
this sketch is not ready.
That's okay. Cassie was drawing it, but yeah. But we had very different ideas. I don't know. I might try to draw it, but if you never see anything, it means it did not go well. NPC says, if someone from the 1800s would time travel to today, he'd be amazed by what is mundane to us. Why are there two people stuck in the picture? Right? Like, couldn't even understand it. Jim said that Cole's handmade bolts. And Josh, what items are invented as a result of these efforts, a la microwaves and Teflon? So that's a really good question because I snuck in a thing of like, that's where some of the sponsorship would go is it would push some of that innovation of like the best propulsion things or the best combustion engines or the I don't know. I don't know yet, right? But that is a very good question that you would answer.
That would mean that like maybe later on revisiting this Goblin City, who knows what this is going to turn into.
Oh,
right?
yeah, totally.
But maybe that actually becomes a very manufacturer's like haven. Like they're making like awesome scientific stuff and you're like, oh my god, a city of goblins.
Right? Some people go there to work because that's
the Silicon Valley of
Cassie, I was gonna say Silicon Valley. That is perfect touchstone. It has become the hotbed for the best engineers and tinkers and treasure hunters. And every year this festival shows up, but like now there is so much industry there. Just because like eventually a big company comes in and they build a factory because they need to get up there, you know?
Yeah.
And so there is a lot, and I love the interesting mixture of things we're getting to put together and then the lens we get to look at it through. This has been a lot of fun. Oscar says, Job Cola after all, Gob Cola, okay. The design would be metal wood like the transition from wood ships to metal ships, same with plane. That's the thing. I like that there being all kinds of different ones. I like somebody putting together.
I would imagine
one of like an alternative. I don't know.
I would imagine some fabric. Like there's going to be some fabric versions as well.
Oh yeah, right, like wooden fabric or something. Absolutely.
Someone's going to put
because you
fabric
want it as
wings.
light as possible, and I don't know that they have flight just yet. I think eventually they'll get flight, but they don't have flight now. But this would probably be one of the things that led to the discovery of lift and the understanding of flight.
Yes.
And I love now that somehow there's like a history forming of what happens in this goblin world. So we're going to wrap up. This has been Goblin Pinewood Space Derby. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Goblin Space Race coming to you someday, sometime. No. I am going to work on this. I've been looking for the thing I wanted to make for a little while, and I now have the resolution mechanic I want, and then I have the world I want to do it in. I feel now more than ever like I have...
Things are starting to come together.
Things are starting to come together
Fall into
for a
place.
project. So no guarantees, but thank you everybody for joining us for Goblin Space Race. Thank you for all your wonderful ideas and for hanging out. And if you're not a patron and you want to... I will eventually probably release Goblin Space Race, at least in an early version, on our Patreon. If you don't like that or want to wait, eventually maybe it'll be a full release thing. But if you want to see, whatever comes of this, it'll be released on the Tabletop Terrace Patreon, patreon.com/Tabletop Terrace. So... yeah, anything else you wanted to say, Cassie? This was pretty good.
Yeah,
Lots of fun.
Let's see. I have an art station called Redfen Draws. I'm actually going to put it in the chat.
Good idea.
And Instagram by the same name as well. And as things come out, you'll probably see different variations of what this beast could be, or at least what I would like it to be, and we'll see what James wants it to be. And
yeah, right. That
Tabletop
process.
Terrace wants it.
Exactly. I have no clue what. I have a lot of ideas in my head of what it could look like, and none of them are right. So, yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll see. So thank you, everybody. This has been wonderful, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging out.